This was the year I got into Yakuza. Well, a video game series that was previously called Yakuza that now has significantly more confusing naming conventions. In 2023, I played and finished Yakuza Like a Dragon Ishin, and the game that ended up being my 10th favorite of this year, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. I am years late to the party on this, I admit, but wow, I am just so taken with this series, with its commitment to both goofiness and melodrama, its understanding of cinematography and lighting, its ability to grab a bike off the streets of Sultan Bori and smack a guy with it. The Man Who Erased His Name is a more bite-sized title than the franchise is known for. I finished it in 15 hours rather than 50. But in those hours, it managed to pull that amazing Yakuza trick, making me feel like the weight of the world depends on a fist fight between two shirtless men. Kazuma Kiryu is one of the coolest motherfuckers alive, and his sincerity and shocking emotional vulnerability across this game resulted in a near transcendent final couple hours. With a history as long as the Yakuza franchise, I totally understand that feeling of not knowing where to start, guilt over skipping past titles, all of that. But listen to me, just pick one and start it. The series will win you over. Also, had Yakuza Like a Dragon released this year, it might have been at the top of this list. 2023, what a year, huh? Referred to by some as the best year for games ever, a superlative that, I don't know, sure. It was a good year for playing games. It was a bad year for being the people who make them, but I did play a lot of games this year. There were over 50 that I rolled credits on for the first time. Editor Jacob, let's see those games! So just remember, my beloved viewers, that if you're mad at this list, you can scroll back through that compendium and see if I even got around to the game you think got overlooked, and by the time you search the entire thing, you'll hopefully have remembered that this life on Earth is fleeting and all we have is each other. I am genuinely sorry I didn't play Baldur's Gate 3 though, you should roast me for that one. Resident Evil 4 is a perfect game. This, as much as anything, might be the overarching narrative of my YouTube channel. And while I doubted they would screw it up per se, I was very nervous about the prospect of Capcom remaking one of my favorite games of all time, if they could maintain the chemical purity of that 2005 original while piling on even more story, more graphics, more budget. The short answer is, yeah, they did it. You can and should watch the video I made earlier this year about remaking horror games. This new Resident Evil 4 came with trade-offs, of course it did. But they preserved so much DNA of the original, the rhythms of the combat, the feel of treasure collecting and upgrading your briefcase. While I was worried in the lead up that they would have taken stuff out of the enormous original campaign, I was continuously surprised that they actually added even more stuff in. This is even more true with the fantastic Separate Ways DLC that came out in September, where almost all of my favorite missing aspects were added back. It is not nearly as important as the original game, nor does it feel quite as revolutionary as something like the remake of Resident Evil 2, but it is so fun. I'm glad they didn't let modernity get in the way of it just being a blast. Now, can I please get a co-op Mercenaries mode, Capcom? I know you're listening. The pitch for Hi-Fi Rush sounds like something I'd mumble in my sleep. A rhythm-based game in the style of Devil May Cry, directed by the guy who made The Evil Within 2, with boss battles scored by Nine Inch Nails and The Prodigy. And yet somehow, this game not only exists, but manages to be more than the sum of its parts. I sometimes feel silly saying a game is a labor of love. Almost all games, no matter how bad, are products of passion and commitment, and all games, no matter how good, take nitty-gritty, boring work. But that being said, boy, can I feel the love in Hi-Fi Rush. There are animations in this game that are so much better than they need to be that I literally whooped the first time I saw them. No one would expect this style of game to invest so heavily in comedy, but it does, and pulls off extremely goofy, charming bits. No one would be disappointed if this game didn't have a boss fight in a Scrooge McDuck-ass treasure vault against a mechanical werewolf set to a remix of Beethoven's Fifth by Wolfgang Gartner. But guess what, buddy? But the real treat is that all the above and beyond work that this game does stands on an absolutely rock-solid mechanical foundation. Hi-Fi Rush tying the combat to the beat of the music isn't just a gimmick, it actually makes the fighting make sense in a way that other stylish action games, even titles like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, sometimes struggle with. Hi-Fi Rush flows so well because it understands a fundamental truth about the genre. All good action games are rhythm games. This one is just kind enough to show you the notes. Although I beat 52 games for the first time this year, plenty of those weren't actually from the calendar year 2023. The first game I beat this year was Rockstar's 2003 controversy hotbed Manhunt. One of my favorite games I played was Grasshopper's 2005 stunner Killer 7. Both of these, and many others, were for my podcast, Something Rotten, which covers rotten games. I'm really proud of the work we did this year, and we'll be covering some extremely cool stuff in the coming months, so check it out. You were probably just thinking, wow, I wish there was another podcast where dudes talked about video games. Right? Anyway, there have been a lot of games since 2012 that I would describe as journey-likes. That is to say, titles that concentrate on being artsy and wordless and moving. And while I generally enjoy this micro-genre, I haven't found any that have felt as original as Journey, that is, until I played Jusant. Maybe Journey isn't the best place to start, actually. Jusant, a title that the game informs us refers to a receding tide, is a climbing game. And it distinguishes itself from the million other games where you clamber up walls and over ruins by taking it seriously. Rather than simply pressing A to seamlessly run up cliffs and jump from ledge to ledge, Jusant is resolutely grounded in its protagonist's abilities. You have a button to hold onto the wall. With each arm, you have to manually search for the next handhold. If your legs can't provide support, your stamina will drain far more quickly. It's kind of a Death Stranding approach to climbing, actually. An action we take for granted in most video games turned into the whole mechanical hook. And boy, what a place Jusant gives you to climb. The entire goal is right there in front of you the whole time, an enormous cliff higher than you can crane your neck to see, and you simply go up and up and up. The environmental storytelling is unexpectedly interesting, and the text logs you can find are pretty well written. But the narrative of Jusant is just one of raw ascent, pushing yourself further as the wall changes with the textures and colors of rock. In melding the beauty and meditative-like quality of Journey with an intimacy and movement a la Death Stranding, Jusant feels fresh. Not just one of those arty games, but something even more confidently its own. There's a flaw in these sorts of videos, which is that for some reason the games industry insists on continuing to release games even after I put out my yearly list. So, a full year late, I just want to mention that Marvel's Midnight Suns, which released in December of last year, absolutely rips and potentially would have been on my list if it had come out earlier and I was able to spend more time with it. Stay tuned for 2024 to learn what late releasing game I missed from this year. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, The Lord of the Rings: Return to Moria, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, the Definitive Edition, Tchia, or to use its full name, Tchia, a game inspired by New Caledonia, accomplishes something I assumed was impossible. It's an open world game, a big open world game, with lots of activities and collectibles and all the other things we associate with the familiar big budget studio format, except it's developed by a team of about 12 people. And not only is Tchia both technically functional and visually beautiful, there is a specificity and a character to every inch of the game. It's present in one of your primary modes of locomotion. You could just possess a bird. Or you could possess a rock or a coconut and then hurl that coconut halfway across the island and then repossess that coconut as it hurls through the air and bounce your way across the landscape. You can see that character in the animations, which are incredibly charming and personable. Tchia herself is so goofy and expressive and fun to inhabit. Or the story, which is both silly and shockingly dark. It has numerous dance parties, a baby getting eaten, and an entire eco-terrorism chapter. Or the music that accompanies those dance parties, which you'll play yourself on multiple instruments. And by the way, in a year of great game music, Tchia easily wins my vote for best score of the year. Even the photo mode is wonderful. A physical camera with film you have to develop yourself, meaning you won't actually know if your self-timer shot worked out until you go to the dark room. But Tchia's best quality is obvious from its subtitle, that so much of its specificity comes from being rooted in New Caledonia. It's a great example of how expanding our artistic taste to new cultures isn't good in just some nebulous diversity sense. It allows for straight up more varied and interesting experiences too. Quick question. Does this list feel too limited to you? Do you wish you also knew my favorite books, movies, TV of this year? Well, good news, that video exists. It's on Nebula. More on that at the end. Among the many endorphin-causing feelings in games, solving a puzzle has to be towards the bottom of the list for me. It's not that I hate them, but like pulling off a perfect parry will always rank higher than thinking through a tricky mystery that the devs made, which is all to say, god dang does humanity do so much right that I don't even care there's no parry mechanic. It shouldn't be surprising at all that I like Humanity, given its pedigree. Developed by Enhance Games, aka the Tetris Effect people, Humanity is a game that innately understands that people as a mass, as almost a liquid, is simply the most interesting thing you could put on screen. It never lets you forget that what you're dealing with are clumsy, fallible humans. Humans that will collide with each other and fall off paths and fight pointlessly ad infinitum. And by making the gears of your puzzle so fascinating even before you found a solution, Humanity alleviates much of the frustration of being stumped. Even getting it wrong results in an absolutely hypnotizing spectacle. This is paired with an absurdist writing style a la Katamari, and a score that's just as important as the visuals in creating the game's existentialist tone. And because every piece of its aesthetic design is so abstract and so evocative, Humanity can function as a metaphor for everything. Solidarity, division, war, labor, achievement, loss. It is promising a lot to name your game Humanity. But the folks at Enhance Games have already made a rail shooter about consciousness and a Tetris game about enlightenment. At this point, they're one of my favorite teams working today, and I'm delighted that Humanity is another shining example of their weird, magical creativity.
We're close to Rubicon. Wake the dog up.
It is intimidating to start some games, especially if you know you want to like them, but say, they come from a developer known for hard games and from a series known for how in-depth its mechanics are. But then, sometimes, you play the first level and know the game is going to grab you so hard that the intimidation will just melt away. Armored Core 6 feels good. That would be my headline, which might seem like faint praise, but I promise it's not. Most games couldn't dream of feeling as good as Armored Core 6, and most games couldn't dream of making that feel as crucial to the experience of play either. Because Armored Core is a game about feel, about welding pieces on or stripping them off your mech to an absolutely obsessive degree, lining up your weight and energy consumption and chassis abilities for hours, all to do a 5-minute mission where you fly through an empty metal superstructure like a jet fuel-powered god. In a world of derivative games with endless, useless loot, what the hell does 3% poison resist even mean? Armored Core 6 somehow makes every modification noticeable and distinct. You might find an overpowered combination, feel like you found the optimal path through the game, and then find that your friend has an entirely different build that optimizes around challenges in a completely different way. It's the rare game where I actually tried to to think of good names for each of my builds, because it just felt wrong to give thoughtless titles to creations this specific. It certainly helps that the game is operating on levels of cool previously thought impossible. Not only can you paint and decal each part of your mech individually, you can choose how much you want each part to gleam in the cold light of Rubicon's sun. Armored Core 6 has the single coolest set-piece boss fight FromSoft has ever done, some of the best voice acting, and only improves over the 3 playthroughs required to see every mission and ending in the game. And its narrative provides exactly what you want from a mech game. Existentialism on what the machines of war do to the people who fight it, the inseparability of corporate resource extraction and violence, what it means for a body to become a gun. I did a 6-hour deepest dive on this game on MinMax, another podcast I'm on, and every minute of that dive was filled with fascinating discussion on how Armored Core fulfills and expands the themes of its genre. Every minute we weren't talking about how cool that worm was, at least.
Watch out for friendly fire.
Secondary shield down.
I just can't believe they did it. That's my overwhelming thought about Lies of P. I can't believe that a modestly sized team with basically no pedigree in the genre decided we're going to make a Bloodborne-style game about Pinocchio, and not only got that idea out the door, but somehow delivered to a degree that sometimes even surpasses its influences. Let's start with the bad stuff. The game is called Lies of P, a title that maybe could have used a little punch-up. One of your main methods of leveling is with the, quote, P organ, a name that definitely could have used some punch-up. Okay, that's all the bad stuff. How about the damn level design in this game, huh? Somehow all thematically consistent within the world of Pinocchio, and yet endlessly varied and bespoke and detailed and just labyrinthian enough to let you breathe a big sigh of relief when it unexpectedly swings you right back around to the checkpoint. Or the fact that the weapons are like all cool and interesting, to the extent that I'm tempted to build around various spears and scythes and hammers in a way I virtually never feel with Souls games. 2/3 of the way through the game, I found a katana so sick, I literally reworked all of my stats around it, and it was worth it. Lies of P also gets that a game like this necessitates near constant enemy variety, and throws you into a wholly unique scenario about every 10 minutes. Talking about what I love in this game wouldn't necessarily devolve into nitty-gritty gameplay details. There are a number of ways it facilitates switching between elemental status effects, for instance, which adds a layer of planning on top of the raw reflexes needed to get through fights. In general, more things are renewed each retry and fewer things are permanently consumed. Even Sekiro tied your prosthetic actions to spirit emblems for some reason. Like Armored Core, actually, the game encourages continuous tinkering, appropriate for a puppet, I guess. But the greatest strength of the game comes from its greatest challenges, the bosses. They pull off what is crucial to the soulsy feeling of the game, which is to be equal parts scary and awe-inspiring. Almost every fight, although frequently tough as nails, is just so intricate and beautifully designed that you can't help but respect it. I laughed many times as I realized the fight I just dragged my way through was only the first of a multi-phase duel, but it never made me want to quit. Lies of P just gets it, you know? That's what I keep coming back to. They understand what I love about these games, why, and how to hone that experience even further. I just can't believe they pulled it off. I think The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Which is a funny thing to say about a game built around, like, jank. How many times did my Link cobble together a lopsided hot air balloon, unsteadily propel himself off the ground, and then look up to see the horizon of Hyrule blanketed in a sunset so radiant it could never get old? How many times did I shoot a light into the distance of the depths, only to realize that I was standing on a vast mountain, bathed in the dark, looking at an underground canyon that stretched hundreds of feet below me? I know that discovery was the revelation that Breath of the Wild built itself upon, and it's true that Tears of the Kingdom can't quite recapture that feeling of the first time, but in making its whole world an even more flexible toolbox for you to ascend, rewind, and ultra-hand your way through, the discovery feels even more individually gratifying. Never has a game made it so fun to see something in the distance, plot out how you'll get there, and then succeed or catastrophically fail in that journey. Add a Korok helplessly strapped to that plan for good measure, and you are good to go. Nintendo is a strange company to talk about. I can't tell you how exciting it is for this juggernaut corporation to put out something as experimental, as non-directed as Tears of the Kingdom. The commonly cited fact that the game got an extra year to hone its absurd mechanics is something only possible within the AAA machine. If this does mark a change in their design ethos to generally let the player take the reins a little more, I think that freaking rocks. At the same time though, much of what Nintendo does as a company is like overtly bad for the industry. Even Tears of the Kingdom itself has many of its most exciting innovations patented. I love the tension between Tears of the Kingdom's beauty and inherent goofiness. I hate the tension between the art and commerce sides of the same game. I don't mean to get soapboxy here. Lord knows there are other games on this list made by companies with problems. But part of the thrill of Tears of the Kingdom is getting a glimpse into another world of possibilities where massive games can be weird and invest in technology that can find magic in the physics of a stack of trash. There are more paths to progress than simple photorealism, and it's electrifying to watch Tears of the Kingdom lay that path. But that path can only be followed by a healthy industry, one that values art and labor and history. We don't have that industry. And I don't think Nintendo is trying to build it. Reviewing games is hard for a number of reasons, but one of the things I most commonly struggle with is essentially the question of, where do you start? Do you start playing a game with the assumption that it's perfect, a masterpiece, 10 out of 10, and then subtract points for each of your criticisms? Or do you start at 0 and award a game every time it does something that impresses or delights you? The former strategy rewards polish, basically, a smooth experience, refinement. There were several of those games that came out this year, all of which reviewed quite well, and I understand why. They didn't do anything wrong. But I lean towards the latter strategy, because those games are the stickiest. A game can be so polished, so smooth, it basically slides right out of memory. What I want is a game that's not trying to be smooth, that's aiming for something radical, that's swinging for the fences even if it doesn't always connect. It's Alan Wake 2. That's the game of the year. Here's another question. How often do we get a game like Alan Wake 2? It's a trick question though, because what does a game like Alan Wake 2 even mean? Is it a moody and occasionally deeply scary horror game? A mixed media meditation on genre? A metatext on writing itself? An interrogation of what authors owe their subjects? A reflection on the history of the studio that made it? Yeah, it's all those. How often do we get a game that does all that? Never. I cannot believe how dense a game Alan Wake 2 is, how much it gives a player to unpack, but not in the form of lore. Wake is a text, one bursting with themes and metaphor and different possible readings of the same events. It is literally constantly rewriting itself, and I cannot wait to play it again with my new knowledge of where it ends up. It's also monumental as a piece of visual design, from the world's best opening title card to its Max Payne-ified version of New York to its spiraling forests. I know I was just bemoaning photorealism, but Wake uses its lighting and volumetrics so goddamn effectively it's hard to be mad. Whether it's a live-action Alex Casey superimposed into a foggy alleyway, or the shallow depth of field in Saga's Mind Place, There's just so much attention paid to every element of the visuals here that they seamlessly blend into the narrative, blurring the line between reality and fiction, just as the pages of Wake's book do. All the performances perfectly understand the assignment. Somehow Alice Wake can deliver emotionally devastating monologues in the same space as Casey's scenery-chewing noir, in the same space as Ilmo and Yako's homemade commercials, and they all work in the bizarre reality this game constructs. Alan Wake 2 is not the most fun I've had this year, or the least frustration. In many situations, I think the combat in this game is outright bad, and the environmental navigation is passable but not thrilling. But ultimately, it is the game that made me most excited to be playing video games this year, a game that shows the potential of the medium in a way that we'll be singing the praises of for years to come. That will always be more important to me than how satisfying it is to shoot a guy. And that's it. Close the book on 2023. Don't do that, actually. This is a year that will matter in the future. We will feel the ripples of the incredible art created this year, just as we will feel the waves of thousands of game dev layoffs, corporate mergers, and living games. I'm very proud of the work I made this year, scripts and videos that I poured my heart into. I am very excited for some things I'll be doing in the next couple months on this channel. And I also frequently wonder if any of this means anything at all, which is just the experience of creating art, I think. But I'm here, as I was last year, and I will be next year because of you. The thousands who have ever supported me on Patreon, the thousands more who joined Nebula, and that's the reason all this exists. All those same people, that's you, showed up to raise tens of thousands of dollars for charity every year, and you know, I'm just very grateful for this community. Anyway, I have one more point to make about Resident Evil 4. Okay, so yeah, there's an exclusive Nebula video with a bunch of stuff I didn't talk about here. Did I make it just because I wanted a place to talk about Scavenger's Reign, How To with John Wilson, and my favorite book of last year, by Maybe. I do actually do things other than play games, and often I don't get to talk about those things publicly. Until now, that is. Every person you've ever met is strange in specific ways that you could not even begin to imagine. It does make you mad at every other animated movie. It seems like video games struggle so much at having characters really sound like they're talking to each other, and it's just done really well in here. And hey, I know who you are. You're a big fan of this channel, and maybe you signed up last year with a great bundle deal, and now it's been a year, and that bundle is about to expire, and you're thinking, how do I keep getting Nebula and support Jacob and not break the bank? Well, I'll tell you. Follow the link in the description. It'll take you to my page on Nebula. This is important because when you sign up through my page like this, that money goes directly to funding me making more videos. Here's another important note. For the holiday season, Nebula is once again offering a lifetime membership, meaning you pay once, you get access forever. No recurring subscription, no fuss. Or get the normal subscription, which is only $2.50 a month. Either is totally fine with me. Since it's December, a perfect time for gifting Nebula to your loved ones, let me just break down this year in terms of exclusive Nebula content from me. We have the previously mentioned Best of Year video, multiple fully original essays like this one on the failed space weapons of the US military, or this one on my favorite forgotten FPS mechanic, multiple cooking videos, one following the baffling instructions for Wanted Dead's lasagna, and one attempting to make pastries painted by Monet, one where I revisit a paper I wrote on the death penalty in college and then critique it from the perspective of a professional essayist, a full recording of the talk I gave this summer at the Durham Public Library, many hours of spoiler-filled discussions on my favorite games of the year, and a ton of bonus episodes of my podcast Something Rotten. And I'm not the only one on there, by the way. You get everyone else's exclusive stuff too. I'm gonna stop talking now, because I think you get it. Nebula is the best deal I ever get to advertise. Jump on now, you'll get enough videos of mine to make it through this long winter.